New this morning, Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the United States may move on from efforts to reach a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine if there's no clear progress soon. Take a listen to what he said to reporters in Paris this morning as to the state of those negotiations and what America's European allies can do to help move things forward.
We'd like them to remain engaged. I think they can help us. I think the UK and France and Germany can help us move the ball on this and get this closer to a resolution. I thought they were very helpful and constructive with their ideas. So we welcome their input. We welcome their involvement. We think it's important. There are probably elements of this as well. I always remind everybody that part of the sanctions against Russia, many of them, are European sanctions that we can't lift if that's ever to be part of a deal. So they're going to have to be involved no matter what. This war has no military solution to it. It really doesn't. It's not going to be decided with, neither side has some strategic capability to end this war quickly. And so what we're talking about here is avoiding thousands and thousands of people from dying over the next year. We're trying to avoid that. We saw what happened last weekend with a missile strike in Sumy where people died on Palm Sunday. We're just going to see more like that on both sides. We're going to see more of that. We're trying to prevent it. But we're not going to continue to fly all over the world and do meeting after meeting after meeting if no progress is being made. So if they're serious about peace, either side or both, we want to help. If it's not going to happen, then we're just going to move on.
So, David Ignatius, the Biden administration never said they're going to move on, but I can't underline the fact enough that the Biden administration, I know that you know this, they were saying this going back to late 2023, 2024. This is a stalemate. These are like World War I lines. It's a war of attrition. Man, at some point, they need to get exhausted and need to make peace. Obviously, that's not happening right now, but Marco Rubio did say that he had confidence in Great Britain, France, and Germany in moving this process along. Tell us where we are right now and what you expect to see in the coming weeks.
So, Joe, sad to say, the effort that President Trump began to bring this war to an acceptable, and I mean that means a lasting and just solution, seems to be running out of gas. When I hear the Secretary of State say, well, we may be ready to move on, that tells me that the president is getting bored, that he hasn't made the progress that he wanted. He promised he'd get this done in a day, and then it was a few weeks, and here we are, more than 2 months into his administration. And what he's finding is that his friend, Vladimir Putin, doesn't want to make any concessions, is not, in fact, prepared for the peace process that Donald Trump has teed up. Rather than pressure Putin to move him towards a deal that would bring a satisfactory end to this war that would stick through the rest of the administration, Trump, Rubio, their team seem to be getting ready to walk away from it, leaving it in the hands of the Europeans. And I'm sorry to say that despite enormous efforts by the Europeans, the British, French, to get ready to take up as much of the American burden of supplying weapons, supplying intelligence, they simply don't have the resources. They're not able to make up that gap, which means that Ukraine is going to be heading into this summer, absent some changes, in a situation where its losses will be ever greater. The bravery of Ukraine to have fought to this point is extraordinary, the losses they've experienced. But when you hear Rubio say, we're about to move on, to think about what that means. That means people naked, vulnerable, without intelligence or interceptor missiles, Patriot missiles that can take down the huge ballistic missiles coming into them from Russia, the deaths that are going to result. And again, I come back to what Trump correctly said. It's time for this war to end, but it's going to require him to put more effort into it than he's been prepared to so far. You don't just stand there if you're Marco Rubio and say, well, we haven't made any progress. I think that's it. What you do is go back to the parties, in particular, they've already pressured Ukraine, God knows. You go back to Russia and say, this is not acceptable. And if you don't begin to move and make concessions, we're going to pressure you further. That's what an administration that's serious about negotiating peace would do.
You know, Ed Luce, of course, you just you're about to release your biography on Dr. Brzezinski, who warned repeatedly throughout his career about the long history of Russian imperialism. I saw a clip of Richard Nixon from 1974 issuing a dire warning saying we better get it right in Russia. This was, again, in 1994, because there's a long history of Russian imperialism, and we will not have to fight communism in the next century, but we would have to fight a Russia trying to reconstitute basically the old Russian Empire. Remember Mark Brzezinski, Vika's brother, and then the ambassador of Poland, I correctly pointed out that Putin doesn't want to reconstitute the Soviet Union. He wants to reconstitute the old Russian Empire, and that means, with the capitals of Odessa and Kyiv brought back in under Russia's control. It appears that after all the fighting, all this war, all the talking, we are back where we started in this war. Putin won't be happy until he has Kyiv and Odessa.
No, he won't. And when, Rubio says that they're prepared to walk away from this, what he really means is, as David has just very eloquently set out, is he's preparing to pull the plug on Ukraine, because there have been no sustained efforts to get Putin to agree to a real ceasefire. He has breached the one that's about to end, which was just confined to energy infrastructure. As Rubio did mention on Palm Sunday, with some really obscene breaches, obscene attacks on civilians during that period as well. So the idea that, by implication, this is Europe and Ukraine, the border's in their court, is completely wrong. The ball should be in Russia's court. It should be Steve Witkoff going to Moscow and reading the riot act to Putin. Instead, he's going and sort of putting his hand on heart as if he's pledging pledging allegiance to Putin. It is an extraordinary, asymmetric, one-sided, 87-day attempt at peace that really doesn't amount to any serious attempt at peace. And I think that Dr. Brzezinski would not be alone in seeing this as a bad faith effort to end the war. And David's right, the war needs to be ended, but this has been a bad faith effort to end the war. Putin is under no pressure from the Trump administration to come to the table. There have been no credible threats. There have been no credible sticks offered to Putin, just carrots. And until that changes, there's not going to be any kind of credible peace process.
Putin was right. All he had to do was wait it out, wait out the West, wait out the United States.